The trial for President Trump's former campaign manager begins today in Alexandria, Virginia. Paul Manafort faces charges of tax evasion and bank fraud. He denies the claims, and the case is not expected to focus on potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. For this trial, special counsel Robert Mueller and his team have lined up 35 witnesses and more than 500 pieces of evidence. Joining me now is Larry O'Connor, Washington Times columnist, host of The Larry O'Connor Show on WMAL Radio.
That's a great name, doesn't
here
it?
In D.C. Larry O'Connor's a great name?
I know. No, the show, they said, we're going to do a Larry O'Connor show. We got to hire a guy, and luckily, I had the name.
Okay, you know, he also does comedy every night down the street.
You got to laugh in this town, you know that.
You sure do. Let's talk about jury selection in the Manafort case.
Yeah,
There's still time for him to cut a deal? No? Yes?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people observing this think that that's what this is really all about, and that's why so many people who are supporting the administration are looking at this with a pretty skeptical eye. People have to understand, first of all, listen, Paul Manafort could very well have broken the law, and if he did, he should be dealt with. Justice should be served here.
But this is nothing to do with collusion.
Absolutely nothing to do with collusion. The fact that Robert Mueller's investigation sort of brought this in suggests that they're really trying to press him, push him, and force him into a deal.
Or they just want him to have a trial about the fact that he didn't pay taxes.
Right. Well, yeah, but so what's interesting is there was another thing that they uncovered about Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney. They handed that off to a different part of the Justice Department, the Southern District of New York. This one they kept, which means that they're using it for their own purposes, I think. The other interesting thing about the charges against Paul Manafort, and again, could very well be guilty, he deserves his day in court, the Justice Department years ago passed on this whole case. This took place years ago. He was doing some lobbying for the Ukrainian government or interests in Ukraine, made tens of millions of dollars apparently, and allegedly kept it offshore, didn't pay taxes. Justice Department looked at it, they investigated, they said, yeah, we're not going to prosecute.
That's the reason
now
why
they are
everybody is talking about this. Let's move on to Rick Gates. Rick Gates, that was his mentor. Paul Manafort was his mentor.
Yeah.
He was another campaign aide. He cut a deal, unlike Manafort. What is his testimony going to do?
That's a lot of people are looking at that. And in fact, what's interesting is this is the only person associated with the Trump campaign, Paul Manafort, that is, who has not cut a deal. He is standing firm and saying, I am not guilty. Mr. Gates did cut an agreement, and the understanding is that he's got some evidence against Manafort. And we'll see. What seems clear, though, is that none of his testimony will have anything to do with linking the Trump campaign with Russian oligarchs and some sort of scheme or some sort of conspiracy to undo the 2016 election.
Manafort faces another trial in September with 7 additional charges. It's going to focus on that work for the Ukraine. Is it realistic to think that this man is going to avoid prison time?
Well, I think it's too soon to tell. We're selecting the jury today. I mean, it's often said that the Justice Department and the federal government won't bring charges unless they have a pretty clear case. But understand, Robert Mueller has a history of actually bringing charges, and some of the people on his team, actually, the attorneys that he has, brought charges against the people involved with Enron, you'll remember. That ended up getting thrown out at a higher court.
Enron was the company in Texas.
Right, the energy company that was guilty of, well, they were found guilty, but then again, those charges were thrown out by a higher court. So people think that, corruption, by the way, I didn't finish my sentence. People think sometimes that just because the feds bring a case, that means that it's a cut and dry guilty. Not necessarily, and Mueller himself has a history of this.
You know, before we go, and I'm being told we have to go right now.
All right.
But before we go, the interesting piece about this is that this is really palace intrigue in Washington. Not so sure across the country.
Yeah, in fact, I open my phone lines here in Washington. I talk to people in West Virginia, Maryland. They don't want to talk about it. They don't care about it. They think it's a distraction. It doesn't matter to their lives about what's going on in their homes and their neighborhoods. But this is what this town feeds off of. Larry
O'Connor, Washington Times columnist, host of The Larry O'Connor Show on WMAL.
Thanks.